Okay, so let's start. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming to today's seminar. I'm Dr. Wei Xiong, an assistant professor of the Department of International Education. Today is my great pleasure and honor to chair today's session by Dr. Fadia Nordveit to give us a presentation on this very important method called inclusive business model canvas. Dr. Fadia Nordveit now is an assistant professor at the Springfield College, also an adjunct researcher, consultant in the faculty of New York University. So next, let me give the floor to Dr. Fadia Nordveit to give the presentation. After that, we will have the time to have the discussion. Okay, so please.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the introduction. And we are a small group, so what we'll be doing is I will obviously go through stuff. And I suggest what we do it, since we have smaller numbers, is if there's something in this presentation that you want me to elaborate on some more, you just stop me right there. Normally I do Q&A at the end, but I think it's just let's have a discussion more than just a straightforward presentation. I think it makes more sense. And if there's anything you want me to clarify more on, let me know. I'm happy to do it. And I would also like to ask you what got you interested in this conversation. I'd actually like to know a little bit about your work, and because that always informs me, because the method that you'll be seeing here is one that is created by me. So it always makes me interested as to who comes in and why, in terms of like what got them into wanting this approach. So I think I just wanted to go over the abstract because I think it sort of gives you a sense again of why I'm here. This model is essentially called the Inclusive Business Model Canvas, and whether you have an educational project that you're working on yourself, or working in an institution, or you're representing an institution or a department, or even a project or a campaign, this particular model can be used for all of those things. That was intentional. When I built this model, you will see when you find out more about it, that I wanted a method that could be potentially translated into more than one thing. Because in America, at least, where I come from, the work of inclusion is kind of tricky. Some people think it's important in the US, and some people are very against it. Because politically, they feel this is a threat, that we don't want to make society inclusive, because if we make it inclusive, then essentially the people who are of the ruling class, and in the US it would be, say, white supremacy, which is sort of the way in which white populations have been ruling the population for many years after they essentially wiped out the Native Americans. A lot of people feel really afraid of this word, being inclusive, because to them it feels that being inclusive means that we are taking away the power from others. So I want to emphasize that it is a very difficult concept in the US to work with. Even people who are very progressive and who want to bring about change, sometimes they don't know how to go about it. They want the right things, that we want to be inclusive, we want to be diverse, we want to be equitable, we want to create belonging, but how? How do you do this? So I took up this challenge because I noticed this a lot in people. There's the group of people that I said that hate it, who don't want it, and then there's the group of people who want it, but they don't know how to do it. So I thought that why not create a method that is very easy to understand, that of course all methods have problems, but some methods have been thought out, and I can tell you this has been thought out for a long time, and I'll share some of those details later in the Q&A. And the whole perspective is, how do we use difference rather than sameness to be the foundations of success? So again, in simple words, how can we, you and I are different, but how can we be different but still be successful together for where we work, for each other, and individually? That is essentially the idea that I want to create, that it is not important for us to all be the same to be successful for and with each other. So that is the basic of it. If you ask me, like, what inspired you, what do you want out of this? I always start my presentations with describing these words, because a lot of people hear these words a lot, and they're like, what exactly does belonging mean, inclusion mean, diversity mean, equity mean? So what do they mean? I want to start with diversity because that's the easiest one to explain. It's more quantity, right? So like when we're in this room for diversity, I think of it as pretty simple. Where are we from? What are kind of our intersectional identities? Where are we from? What is our age? How different are we? What religion are we? What spiritual faith are we? What sexual orientation are we? That is diversity. Like we try to map out who has been invited to a party. I always do a party metaphor when I describe this, that when we are having a party, diversity is essentially what are the kinds of people you invited to the party. Let's make a note of it, okay? Let's move to the next one, equity. So when you go to a party, have you often been to a party where you felt that, this happens to me all the time because I don't eat certain food. For example, I don't eat pork, I don't eat, I don't eat a lot of meats. I eat some meat, so it's easiest to explain what I eat. I eat chicken, I eat some beef, and I eat sometimes lamb. So essentially it depends for me a lot. And when I go to parties, oftentimes people are like, oh, they have, say I am invited to a party, there's a lot of pork, or people didn't ask me that what do you eat when you go into a party. So when you are invited to a party, when you are considering that what your guests eat, and actually having options so that if all of us, say the party had the 6 of us, I think it would be kind of easy to ask sending you an email, all 6 of us, asking what are your dietary restrictions. Yeah? So that is equity, which is essentially asking people for their special needs and making accommodations for that. It's pretty simple. I don't know why people get so annoyed at it. A lot of people, I have been to parties where people are like, you must eat what we eat. We don't, if you don't eat, you're not, you force people to do things that they don't want to do. So it's simple. Some people just don't do certain things. Why can't we live with that and create accommodations for that? That's equity, folks. Inclusion, folks, is have we all been to a party where we felt we were invited, but once we were there, we were kind of awkward. We were standing in the corner. Raise your hands for folks. I have for sure been to that party where I've been invited somewhere, and then I was like, oh, I'm kind of like, they're not really including me in the conversation. I feel a little bit left out, or I feel a little awkward. I'm there, I'm diverse, the party is diverse, they invited me, but they don't know how to include me in any conversation. I'm feeling kind of awkward. That is inclusion, folks, or opposite of inclusion, which is that you don't feel included. So what do you do in a party to create people, when you invite them so that they feel included in the party, okay? Belonging, folks, is the best, to me, that's why I put it on top, which is the biggest goal in diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, according to me, is belonging, which is the ultimate form of creating commitment, loyalty, so that you put in, you feel like you belong to a space, or to a cause, or a commitment, or to an institution, or to a department, and you're willing to put out hours that you normally would have never done. No amount of salary can pay you the amount of commitment that you bring into your work, because you feel so connected and to the cause that everything is worth it. Have we all sometimes in our lives felt that way about something, that we feel that it doesn't matter how much we earn, we really just want to put everything into it, kind of a thing? So that's belonging, folks. And in a party metaphor, a belonging would be, what is our host and the environment doing for us, so that we feel that we want to come back and contribute to the party, and maybe next time be the person hosting another party or cooking the food for that party for everyone else. So belonging is really the ultimate goal. So in the spectrum of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and in education, you can think of it in the form of departments, in the form of classrooms, in the form of commitment to institutions. Why are some institutions and higher ed institutions so successful in getting their alma mater, their alums, to donate money? I'm pretty sure if someone did a research on that, it would be about who created maximum belonging for the donors who are giving back. Did that make sense? So I think, frankly, financially, educational institutions could benefit a lot from just having this study done, because they would actually create more donations from their graduates that are graduating because they feel so connected to the cause of their institution. Yeah? Okay, so I think I wanted to sort of go over the definitions first so that we all kind of understand the word. I'm going to be using those words over and over again. And in short, I'll be using DEIB, which is diversity, so that, you know, it's a lot of words, so it's faster. So a little bit about me and what I do. I'm Dr. Fadia Nordtveit. I actually am the founder of a consulting company called Collaboratively on top of my 2 academic commitments, assignments that Doctor just spoke about, which is I'm an assistant professor at Springfield in the Department of Media and Communications. And I'm a researcher and a consultant, a part-time faculty also in NYU in the Stern School of Business. And the consulting company actually commercializes my research. So what I do is, the model that you'll see, I actually go out and consult companies, organizations, institutions. I do workshops and trainings on them, which I'll be telling you more about as well, to helping people implement my model into their departments or their universities or leadership or whatever. So that was the reason why my consulting company was open. I wanted to actually use my research to do something. To change stuff. It's not just enough to write a paper, which, you know, I write also. But I feel it's important to use my research to bringing about and implement change. The other hats that I hold is I actually am a producer of a television show on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. We'll look at a little bit, you know, a couple of examples of it later. And the last hat that I hold is I'm a co-editor of an academic journal as well with the University of Milan in Italy on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So I have sort of the academic, the commercial, as well as the producer. So you can call me diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging from every angle you can think of. And I have been fortunate that this model has been featured in Financial Times, in Boston Globe, in various podcasts and various NBC network TV channels, and like I've been very fortunate with that. Yeah, but I'm also, so these are sort of my logos, so meaning Talking Out of Line is my show. This is my previous nonprofit from my dissertation, my PhD work, which led to my book, second book that I wrote based on that, and then that is my consulting company. The logo of my journal and everything is not there, but we can talk about it if you, and actually we're still accepting, we're doing a special issue, it's a good place to, we're doing a special issue journal submission on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. If any one of you is writing a paper right now that you want to submit, we are still accepting papers on that. So please talk to me if you're interested in knowing about that. Because that would be a great, like it'll be a great special issue, and we would definitely welcome papers from your university. Yeah, so a little bit about the model before you see it. I created the IBMC as a tool. Some people call it a tool. The techie people call it tool. The methodology, the nerds like us from academia, we call it methodology. Framework also, some people call it framework. I've seen like government people call it framework. That helps businesses and organizations build a foundational structure based on the principles of DEIB. Remember what I told you, that DEIB is kind of tricky for people. Some people want to do it, but they don't know how. And I wanted to create something neat and clean and easy that you can learn. I actually train leaders, managers, department heads, deans, whatever you want to call it, startup owners, people who are starting a company, who want to build an inclusive company, to use my model to create a more inclusive department, business, institution, etc. The model is actually getting featured by the end of the year in my third book called Millennials, Gen Z, and the Fair Trade Revolution in the United States. I personally don't like the title anymore. I'm kind of arguing with my editor these days to try and change this. She likes it, I don't. So we're trying to come to a conclusion because I actually want the model's name in it. Anyways, that's just, who knows what the final name is going to be, but it's coming out at the end of this year. Inclusive business model canvas, this is the big reveal. So the whole model has so of course I'm going to go over it quickly, the model, very, very quickly, and anyone who wants to know more about it can obviously talk to me about it, and if you are citing this model, please make sure that you are mentioning me, and I'm happy to share with you document that clarifies this in more detail if you are using it for. So I've had a lot of people come to my presentation, they're like, I want to use this for my, this methodology or this tool for my paper or whatever. All I ask for you to do is to reach out to me. I'll give you more follow-up information, and then you cite me. That would be great. So I'll tell you a little bit about this. I inherited for one of my jobs prior, this was 10 years ago, what in America is used in business schools called the business model canvas. Forget the word inclusive. It was called the business model canvas. It was good. It helped organizations have a structure. A lot of people, I was doing the job of working with startups, with companies, with organizations to be like, oh, I have an idea. I want to save the world from climate change, but I don't know how to do it. And then you work with that company or that person to build a model for their business or their nonprofit or their educational project to try and solve climate change problems somewhere, okay? Let's just say in Hong Kong, to stick to the fact that because we're in Hong Kong right now. However, when I was working on issues of building models for people, which is what I seem to love to do, I realized that I don't really care to build a model that doesn't take care of inclusion and sustainability. So this canvas that you see, I call it a canvas, has the capacity to work with sustainability, accountability, and DEIB. So let's look at the triangle inside. So the pink triangle is the heart of a company or a project. So, and you can see that there are some numbers and some words. So just on the top of everything, when people are working with me to learn this model, when I do the trainings and workshops of these models with leadership, with whoever wants to learn it for whatever they want to use it for, you can see that there's a quantitative element as well as a qualitative element, both. There are numbers, so you get a score in different areas on how you're doing on inclusivity. And the idea is that every organization has, say let's talk about your university, okay? So we're right now in the Educational University of Hong Kong, yeah? So in your university, I'm sure you have a mission statement, right? You have a core mission statement of your university. You have leadership and staff, people who work here, people who are up there, in the middle, everywhere, all different levels. Then you have most companies or organizations haven't figured out. I work with companies very close. This is probably the most fun part of my job, these two sections. I often work with people or companies or organizations, and I'm like, what is your foundational pillar? What are you basing your mission on? A lot of people are like, I have no idea, we never thought about it. And that's very common. And then I'm like, okay, let's build some. So in this world, it's important to have clear goals and strategies that we represent this. So like, it's more and more important for millennials and Gen Z to look at an institution. Have you all, how many of us have bought something from a shop, a brand, for example, any brand, because we thought that what they wrote in their ad was cool? That, oh, my husband and I, when we were coming, my husband likes watches, I don't, yeah? I'm not a watch person. My husband likes watches, and we always argue about watches. And because I don't care and he likes watches. And we were walking in the Hong Kong subway, and he showed me something new that Omega has come up with. He loves that brand, Omega, and they made a partnership with Swatch, which is another watch company. And they made one for men that is blue and one for women that is pink. So he said, maybe we should give that each other as a present. I said, but I don't wear watches. And then he's like, but we can wear it together, right? And because, why? He tried to sell me an idea because their logo was, what was it? It was dream high, fly higher. And he said, but that's you. You dream really big and you know, he said, go, that statement is you. You don't like the watch, but that is who you are. And then I was like, Then I started softening up to it because I realized where he was coming from. He meant it, and even if it was a manipulation, it was a good one. Because he was using something about a branding that he thought would hit me. And then I started like, Nordtveit, it's not a bad idea. Maybe, you know, I told him, the end of the conversation was, I'll think about it, and I'll let you know. And then, so essentially what I'm saying is, the business foundation pillars, folks, is that, which is a lot of companies and organizations and departments have no idea what they represent to people. When we walk into a university or a college or a company, it should be clear, at least to leadership, who are we, okay? That is what we work with, and it often is very important in the DEIB world, because what you represent as what you are is really important projection of letting people know what you represent as a company and why I should come to you or buy from you or come to you in a university. The business foundation anti-pillars is, folks, the opposite, which is when you are buying from something, coming to a university to learn, sometimes you're like, I don't want to go to X university because they really do this. That's their tradition. And I don't relate to that tradition. Don't we all make decisions like that? That you don't want to buy something, eat something, go to a restaurant, go to a certain university because they do something you don't want to represent? That, oh, I don't want to go to like that college because that college is about that. I'll give you an example in university culture. In the US, we have what is called fraternities and sororities in some universities. Does anybody here know what is a fraternity or a sorority? Do you have an idea about what it is? It's actually a really, can you tell us what your, I mean, it's always very hard for me to describe them to a non-US audience. How would you describe a fraternity or a sorority to an audience here? Because it's so clear to me because I've grown up, you know what I mean? But it's hard to explain it to people outside who don't know it. Well, how would you describe a fraternity or a sorority?
Maybe at the beginning it's more like the
Greek
special interest group.
Yeah, that's a very, I love it.
From my perspective at the beginning, but then I realized it's not that simple. It's more like the organization as is.
It is definitely an organization culture, and it's also, and it has a history to, oftentimes fraternities and, folks Google fraternities and sororities and you will see that American universities have a tradition. The problem is, it should have been a simple special interest group that, you know, people come together, there are things of interest. But it's more than that. It ends up being about getting drunk, getting rid of, teasing others who are not part of it. Sometimes you're part of fraternities and you're bullying people because there's a certain kind of culture that is very masculine and it's always gender segregated, women versus men. There's a lot of problems with it. So basically, why am I giving this example? Because certain students in America who know about this do not go to schools that have a lot of fraternities and sororities. So there are students who'd be like, I'm not going to go to that college or even apply to it because there's a lot of fraternities and sororities and I don't want to go to a school that has that. I want to go to an institution that does not have fraternities and sororities. So we make these choices. So when we, if we don't know what it is that we represent in our branding and communication about who we are, then we fall prey to not being clear about our message. A lot of the message about being clear about DEIB goals is about clarity of your message and really thinking about soul searching about who you are versus who you aren't. And how does that align with the goals of creating more inclusive structures? A lot of people are like, I don't care about inclusion. I'm like, then my talk is not for you. Then you can just walk out now. And it will not be very useful to you because essentially my end goal is to make people and institutions more inclusive, which is how do we have a college, a classroom, a building, an institution, a country, a town, a government that can actually make everybody in this room and in this town feel better that we are in this space together, where we are safe, where we are happy, where our differences are valued. Okay, so if you look at the, did I do something? Okay. The top is product, service, or experience, which I work with, which is, for example, for a university, it would be the education. So the top is like, what are you putting out or selling to the world? For a university, it would be, what do you sell, folks? Education, right? That is your business. You're in the business of education. And for somebody who makes bags, it would be bags. For somebody who makes aeroplanes, it would be aeroplanes. for someone who is selling, you know, service, like say house cleaning, it would be house cleaning, okay? The remainder of the boxes, folks, represent organizations and their different departments. So if we talk about your university here, don't you have a branding and communication office on campus? There must be a communication office. There must be an office that looks at finances, cost structures. There must be an office that looks at revenue streams. There must be an office that looks at alumni networks and stuff like that. There must be an office that deals with key resources. What do you need to buy and to have as resources? Recruitment of faculty, for example, recruitment of staff to run this institution. Key partners is, I'm sure your university has partners that you have created with regional governments, with sports teams, with brands or whatever that help you stay in the news in China and beyond, and Hong Kong, obviously. And then the top departments are aligned customers, which is who are the customers in a university, folks? Exactly, main customers. So how are you speaking to those students to get them into the door? And whether are you bringing in what kind of messaging are you giving out? Because a lot of times, folks, universities are like, we are internationalizing. We're trying to get international students, but no one wants to apply to us. We can't diversify. Have you considered that all of this did not speak in an inclusive language? Let's work with creating a branding and a message of your organization so that when you finally are looking at evaluating how well you're doing with your customers, in this case students, you will see a rise in the number of students applying if you have figured out all of this right here. Because then those students will hear you and feel like they have to apply to you and come in. But again, that's a decision you have to make. And accountability impact, folks, is my favorite box, which is outside box, which is sometimes we have to sit down and measure the impact of what we do. So there are offices that do it. So for example, my husband is right now here perhaps doing something of that nature, of that box, which is he's doing an assessment of a department, right? So what are assessments, folks? They basically measure the impact and outcome of something. How well is something running? And what are some possible directions? So essentially accountability is this canvas can measure that as well. And then at the end, after I work with people in all of this in different departments, usually I go from department to department, I work with people, and then I give an evaluation, a methodological evaluation on what needs improvement in your institution based on the different angles. So for example, you could have received, the university here could have received 5 out of 5 on branding and communication. That educational university is doing an excellent job in branding and communication. They may find that they're doing 0 out of 5 in key partners. So then I would sit down with you on that your priority should be to fix this in the next year to build more inclusive, if your goal is to create more inclusive change. And remember, what I didn't mention here in any of it is that all of these points in the boxes are measured in the perspective of how inclusive is your goal. So the goal of this canvas is to help your company to become more inclusive. So if this year you score 3 out of 5, 2 out of 5, whatever out of 5, like, you know, not like high scores and your total score is, the total score, by the way, is out of 40, folks. So if you receive, say, 25 out of 5, 40 or something like that, then you basically work with me to figure out what are the areas that I need to prioritize to make my college and my department and my university's mission more inclusive so that you have certain goals you want to reach. I also want to talk about one thing in a later slide, that you can't do this without having some goals about what you want out of inclusion, right? So what are you measuring this against? You're measuring this against what have you already done in this university, since we're using that example of inclusion, that is already inclusive. But you need to work with someone to chart out what do we want the inclusive future to be for this university or for our department 10 years later? What is exactly our goal? You can't really fill this box without knowing what you want in the future. So you need to sit down and really evaluate that I really want by 2040 that we have 50% increase in sexual diversity on campus, or transgender youth increase, or like really sitting and thinking about what it is that you want. And it's something that a goal is important here that you need to work on. Okay, so we'll come back to this again. If that was a good overview, folks, of an initial overview. And actually, I gave you a lot more than I normally go through for this sort of initial overview because I felt that it would be nice to talk about it from the university angles. Wanted to talk about that the inner pink and the yellow is probably the most important thing about an organizational health. If you can work out these things within the people and leadership and the daily staff and administrators and faculty and leadership of any level, you will have really considerably worked out what we call in our DEIB language, creating a shared language of an institution. So the inner triangle, folks, is the core mission, the business foundation anti-pillars, the business foundation pillars, and it's really important to really work those out. And I emphasize a lot of times how to connect it to financial processes, because a lot of times, folks, people are challenging inclusion work by saying, is this the right thing to do? But what if we don't make money? Some companies, you have to be thinking about all companies, whether it's a non-profit or a for-profit. For it to be sustainable, you need to think about money. So my research and the work that I've created definitely points to the idea, and you'll be seeing a lot of examples of it, that there's a lot of research done on the fact that companies that invest in these type of ideas and implement them actually see 19% increase in their profit revenue. So you actually make more profit if you become more inclusive. So even if you're trying to make more profit, working on inclusion and diversity and equity and belonging creates more commitment to the workplace. So think about it. If I really loved my workplace, loved it, I felt valued, I felt like I belonged, I would be that person who would work extra 3 times and not complain much. I'm not saying that's great. I should be rewarded from time to time, and I'll give you some action plans if you want to do this work. But generally speaking, you can get more out of a person who loves you and cares for you and is committed to you than a person who doesn't. So really, it is very logical for organizations to invest in creating movements around this, because you actually, it's again the example that I gave about fundraising. If you go to an alum who had a really bad experience here, what will they say? Give you money? They won't. They'll say, nope, next, I'm not going to give you money, I hated it here. What if you had what if you really treated them well and they got rich and all of that stuff, and you said, can you give me money because I need a new building or whatever? What will they say? Loved it, this is great, please take more, I'll find some more friends to give you more. It's logical, folks, it's logical. I don't know why it's a threat. Okay. The principal idea of IBMC, folks, is to work with difference to create shared standards of equity, inclusion, belonging in the workplace. So we're looking at, again, the idea that I said, you and I can be different, but we can work together to actually create, and research shows that it's important for us to be different. Because you have different good ideas than my different good ideas. And I have different bad ideas than you. So your good ideas that are different from me can actually help me to overcome in a group. If we're put together, working together in a group, your weaknesses and my strengths can help each other out. And our differences can actually create more growth in a company. And there's you'll see research out there. There's many articles that confirm that same idea. That teams that are homogeneous, institutions that are homogeneous, grow less and deepen, and are essentially not growing in the right direction and having more profit. again, if you're thinking from a profit lens, which a lot of educational institutions are thinking with tuition and all of that, but it shouldn't be about that. But if you want to play that card with me about money, you get more money this way as well. The goal of this method is to create a clear and precise organized system. You saw that if you have the canvas, if I teach you how to do that, you can sit down and you can have a strategic plan about what to do that is next. You can have a measurement method, and you can have a qualitative and a quantitative, a mixed method process of looking at this framework and making it very neat and tidy to go up to, say, the president of a university and saying, hey, guess what? These are the scores we got. Let's invest in something to make the scores where we are getting low scores to make it better. And this is why there's research out there on how we can make it better. Folks, I wanted to talk about this because I think this is also really important. That of course we are working here in an educational environment, but this model can work very well for essentially all of these lists. Individuals, anyone who wants to learn a DEIB methodology to apply to their own work, to nonprofits, to businesses and corporations, to educational institutions, to governments, towns, cities, and I have actually used it also. One of my consulting work that I've done was on campaigns. Someone hired me to use my model on figuring out whether their campaign that they were creating to reach out to people on social media was inclusive. So it can be used for processes as well. Really interesting methodological 3 parts, which I think is one of the biggest strengths of this, is that it is good for collecting data on DEIB. So if you wanted to collect data on how this university is faring on DEIB, you could use that one. You can use it as an assessment tool as well, which is how do we assess and create a system and measure it. And then you can also do strategic planning, implementation, and rebuilding using the model to essentially create a plan for the next 10 years, 20 years, 5 years, whatever years, number of months you can think of. So the continuing of this conversation is, why should we care as an educational institution about DEIB as strategic goals? What is the data on educational praxis and outcomes? I have a whole series of data that I have as a slide coming up, 2 slides, and I can send that to you. There's various different, if anyone's interested in, like, I want some articles on the 19% increase. I want some articles on, like I said, teams being different and how that leads to more innovation and maturity and growth of companies. How can embracing DEIB goals bring in more inclusive excellence? In the US, a lot of the terminology, a lot of universities are using this term now. How do we build inclusive excellence in educational environments? We want to be excellent. Excellence has always been associated with universities and higher education, or education as a matter of fact. And how do we actually build inclusive excellence so that we just don't have only one population group? I'm just checking the time to make sure I'm not going over. And how can embracing DEIB goals strengthen? Last but not the least at all, it is very important. How do you, does everybody here know or not know what is education and community goals? That our institutions as educational bodies are not what we call in the US only ivory towers. We don't just exist in society to write papers and to teach people and then forget about what impact we have. We actually belong in a larger town, a city, a country, in the world. We have responsibilities. And how do you embrace these goals and actually create difference? So these are really good research from Fortune 500 magazine, Fortune magazine, McKinsey, Harvard Business Review, Boston Consulting Group about, again, the data I was talking about. Diverse companies see 19% higher innovation returns. If the global workforce becomes equally gender diverse, it can add 28 trillion to the global economy. So again, there's just, if anybody is wanting more of this, I have tons of data on this because I work with this all the time. What is the data on organizational praxis and outcome for embracing DEIB? Again, organizations with sustainable DEI initiatives demonstrate a 20% increase in inclusion and belonging, which corresponds to greater on-the-job effort and reduced turnover. We quit less when we love being somewhere. It's like a breakup, folks. I talk about that. When we love someone, we don't leave them as much. It's the same with our jobs. We spend so much time with our jobs. We break up less with our work if we are happy, right? So institutional DEIB goals and outcomes. How can DEIB goals bring in more inclusive excellence in educational institutions? I think it's obvious to you all after listening to that the more we tap into every student in the room in how we teach and their strengths, we will all just have a better teaching outcome. You know, it's frustrating to be being a professor. Sometimes I think some students are just, you know, forever going, no matter what you do for them, nothing is good enough. But still it irks me because I feel that I feel like I failed them to a certain degree. You know, I don't know if you're a professor, if you're teaching for a long time. I've been teaching for 19 years in higher ed. I started really young. I'm 40. I started teaching in the US when I was 21, when I was in grad school. So I started teaching really, really young, and in undergraduate. So it still irks me when I have that student where I'm like, I felt like I didn't break through to that person, and I couldn't get the best out of them. And I do realize that sometimes it's not my fault. I just feel that because I do this work, I get really disappointed by the fact that something didn't apparently work. I take it upon me to figure out, maybe I just didn't do something in the classroom to get those things that I felt like they really felt like they wanted to contribute. How does, sorry, that's a typo, how does embracing DEIB goals make educational institutions leaders internationally? I know that Chinese universities and Hong Kong universities are really trying to become global leaders in education. If you want to go in that direction, you want to demonstrate the positive of the trend. And this is a good trend. The DEIB is a good trend, and you have to sort of understand what does inclusion mean for a Hong Kong perspective and from a mainland China perspective, right? And working on those strategic missions as a university is actually really important. Have you, and this goes back to what I just said, have you considered how unconscious bias and conscious bias can impact your educational outcomes and who feels at home in your classrooms and university? There's a couple of fantastic videos on YouTube that I can again send your way if you contact me afterwards, that I use in my trainings and workshops that are currently actually I'm producing my own video on unconscious bias, because I think there are some good ones out there, but I want to make my own one. It is extraordinary, folks. If you see, this is from India Today, which is, you know, India is often considered to be competing with China in everything. The two Asian giants, China, India, you know, I'm using China broadly defined, obviously, including Hong Kong. So what I'm trying to say here is those two are often pitted against each other in the Asian context. India is writing this, impact of implicit bias on classroom dynamics and educational equity. How can educational institutions eliminate implicit bias in classrooms and realize the goal of educational equity? Absolutely. Like, how do we change the narrative, right? It's showing that bias and discrimination, folks, in the classroom affects not just learning outcomes, but also overall well-being. There are, again, words like weathering, where there's an increasing amount of research in the US about how systemic racism is making people ill, physically ill. Like how you get treated is making people physically develop pains, psychosomatic pains, and depressed anxiety, and it's not just how you mentally feel. Some people are physically getting worn out by the bad experiences they're having in places that they work and where they go in. So this article is actually pretty amazing because it really speaks about how the systematic exclusion of students in certain educational environments inside classrooms can actually create health problems in people. Yeah, so that's serious, right? I don't think we want to be responsible for someone else being sick. That's kind of too much. And this is a very interesting strategy that the US campuses are using. My institutions, my husband's institution is using this. This is very common. I would like you to look this up in your own time. Campus climate surveys. So these are surveys that are done now yearly in the US institutions, where basically students and faculty, everyone who's related to a college or university, it doesn't have to be just students, it's not just faculty, it's not just staff, it's everyone. is asked to fill out an anonymous survey. It's very long. I think it takes about 30. Did you fill that out ever in Pittsburgh? Did you do this at that point when you were there?
Yes, I did.
So I would say it started taking into impact like 10 years ago. It started happening in some institutions. And basically the idea is every year you ask everybody anonymously certain questions about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, how they feel. And sometimes colleges are so horrified, for example, where my husband works at UMass, which is a very well-known research institution in the United States, a public university. They had horrific results last year, despite being a very inclusive, they think of themselves as very, and frankly it is very inclusive. Everybody was shocked by how bad the results were because it's hardly the school that we would consider as being racist because there's so much worse out there. But we were all like, whoa, what? This is how people are feeling, and now there's a lot of changes happening because sometimes what happens is we think everything is going okay because our little towns, our little hallways, we have friends, we have these people to have food with, all of that is going well, but there may be so many others who are not having our experience. And we just think, because our lives are going well, everybody else is. We need to stop thinking just about ourselves. So it's a very good example to look at. Again, I want to sort of, we're getting towards the end. Is it a smart thing right thing to do, folks, or is it a business smart thing to do? And education, folks, has business outcomes, right? Universities in the US are shutting down one after the other because they're not being able to keep their doors open because their money is not adding up. So anyone who says business and education is separate, they're not thinking about the sustainability of the organization, unfortunately. And so essentially what I always tell people that if you have to remember one thing from this presentation, it would be that get into the idea of understanding and talking to people about this if this means something to you, that it's really important for us to go just beyond the whole idea of, oh, these are these activist folks who think Black Lives Matter, stop Asian hate. Yes, sure, I really want to do the right thing, but guess what? You're going to get more money if you do it too. So if you don't want to do the right thing because you're just a bad person, sorry for using it that way, and I'm sure you care about money. So research shows you that you can be a bad person and still earn more money by doing it this way. So why don't you just earn more money? You see what I mean? So like there's enough research that points the direction that you don't have to use the card of you should be a good person, that's why you should do it. You should do it because it actually makes you earn more money as an institution. So depending on who you are, know the audience that you work with. When I'm doing this talk, I was given the advice when I was started out that when you do this talk, don't bring up in educational institutions the money part. I said, why not? Do education institutions not need to earn money? Look at America. All the institutions are under threat of closing down. Why do you think they're closing down? Because they're having money problems. So we need to talk about that, right? Here's an action plan that I would suggest anyone who wants to do this work in whichever role that they play. Because I think, please feel free to take a photo of this. If you want to do this work in whatever role you have in your life, today, tomorrow, day after, forever, what can be an action plan? Train professors, staff, administrators in DEIB, right? Like, make them go to these type of talks. Get people like me in so that you can be trained in how do you run your department, what are some faults, what are some ways in which you can make it more inclusive. And send them to conferences. There's tons of conferences that are dealing with this from a higher ed perspective, from a business perspective, name it, it's happening. So that's really important. And don't forget that you can't just send people who are lower down in the ladder. Leadership needs to go to these training too. Because ultimately, who makes the decisions? It's the leaders, not the janitors. So you need to focus just on, leaders can be like, oh, we know what we're doing. No, everybody needs to be trained to bring about a culture of change. Incorporate DEIB methodologies in curriculum and syllabus. I'll give you an example. Adding syllabi, using certain kind of language, using certain kind of assignments, using certain kinds of ways in which you encourage different ways of learning. This is its own world, folks. Like the whole curriculum and syllabus and incorporating DEIB methodologies and making your syllabus more inclusive is a huge world out there. Each of these points, folks, if you Google it, You will find tons of resources on this. And again, reach out to me. I can help you navigate that as well. Incorporate DEIB methodologies in hiring practices. How do we hire people in our institution? Who do we hire? And how do we keep them? It's not just enough to hire someone and then they have such a bad experience that they can't wait to leave. When you hire someone who's different from the norm, you need to set up facilities and situations that that person actually wants to stay and contribute to you, and not just run away to the next job because they just hated being here, right? Everyone has had a job like that, by the way. I certainly have. Incorporate DEIB methodologies in classroom content and pedagogical practices. So it doesn't just end with your syllabus and your curriculum. How do you run a class? Who do you call upon? Who do you look at when you're talking? What are the kind of gender pronouns that are being used? What are the kind of, are you inclusive of understanding some students talk more and some students talk less? There's various ways in which you have to understand the pulse of your classroom. So build DEIB classroom methods of pedagogical practices. Incorporate DEIB methodologies in recruiting and retaining students, right? Same as hiring faculty or administrators. Celebrate meaningfully difference across students for whole campus community. So for example, create spaces where people of different cultures can come together and really have cultural dialogues and learning. So one of the things we are struggling with in the US right now is the Israel-Palestine situation. Oh my God, it's a mess. Like there's people arguing, fighting, Jews versus Muslims, then there's the folks who are not Jewish or Muslims who have opinions about it. I mean, it's a mess. And therefore, what we need to do is we're developing these cultural dialogue series of making people actually just get together and talk about stuff related to this, so that we find out about who are you, who am I, can we talk, right? Meaningful collaborations rather than fighting, okay? Create and maintain close relationship with university DEIB office. And if you don't have a DEIB office, I was asking you about it, Emily, then you take the initiative of creating one, because if you followed my idea of what we're talking about, it should A, be the right thing to do, B, the profitable thing to do if you want to be an international leader in an education. Because most universities that are leaders are moving in the direction of having a DEIB office on campus. Create university and department strategic goals on DEIB. So not only the university, let's go through your department and see what can your department especially contribute to this. Each field has a different niche and can have a very different and unique contribution to make in this world, right? So think about university versus department. Reward DEIB efforts in department and university. If you notice that people are doing work, research, programs, etc. on this, reward them. Bring them up. Put them on the page of your website. Highlight this work to encourage this work. Be curious to find out more about how DEIB can benefit you as well. So don't forget, one of the things is that, like I said, going back to the beginning of the presentation, a lot of people who are afraid of it don't realize that this can actually make, when we all are happy, it actually raises the standards for everybody. You know what I'm saying? And that is actually something that you need to take the time to really understand, that if we do DEIB better, is this actually going to make our lives better? You will see there's more out there to prove you that it'll actually be better for everyone than not. Yeah. Last but not the least, how can embracing DEIB goals strengthen your academic community goals? Apart from increase in inclusive excellence, which is really your university, profits, higher profits through tuition or whatever, grants, and rise in internationalization and retention, on a general level in community, in the belonging that you create in the community as an institution, what do you want to be known for? Think about it. Do you want to be known as being an inclusive institution that has just been very inclusive of the community that you are creating around, or do you want to be that selfish institution that has just been there and serves itself, right? Because as an academic institution, we have a responsibility, like I said, to our community and beyond, to the world. And what is really your legacy? Do you want to be known for being a DEIB-focused institution? Again, same thing. So yeah, it helps, again, I wanted to remind you all that when you use data, one of the reasons why I started this work is I want to wanted to build a model that is grounded in data and includes rigorous methodology to address often the conflicting needs of diverse organizational systems. And building a robust diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging plan and implementation is not only the right thing to do, but the profitable thing to do. Thank you. Hope that this made sense, and if people are, please stay in touch. I will actually write down my information on the board, and Emily has my information as well. So, I hope this was, I hope this was interesting to you all in some way. Yeah, if not, then I can write it down here, and Emily